It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
The music stops again, but that's all right because it is October 1. This is by far my favorite month of the year because October means, of course, means Halloween. It means pumpkins. Even around here, at some point, it means that the weather starts to change a little bit. The leaves start to change color a little bit. I will definitely be watching the movie Halloween, which, by the way, earned 4 stars, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, and a young Kyle Richards, if you're into the Real Housewives. But it's the best month of the year. There's playoff baseball on right now. Don't go anywhere, but it's on right now. It's on a network. It's on ABC. The Astros and the Tigers. Come on. Is this 1984? What is happening? Welcome to the Pete Sousa Show, presented by Slovacics. October, if you can tell, I'm fired up. And very good reason to be fired up. I drove by Slovacics today, coming back from DFW, and you can bet that I dipped in there. Got some kolaches. There's no kolaches here. I didn't bring any with me. It's Cameron Stewart, who we'll get to later in the show. We've got a lot on Cam today. A lot of controversy brewing around Cam Stewart after, I guess, an ill-advised tone used in a press conference. We'll talk about it, or maybe we won't. But that's my guy, Cam. Here's my thing about Cam. Let me make a public statement about Cam Stewart right now.
Oh, God.
No, Cam, just be quiet. I trust Cam Stewart. I respect Cam Stewart. I have Cam Stewart's back. Cam Stewart is a brilliant young sports journalist. He does the work, and he means business. And that's the truth. And Cam's going to have a huge career, so we might as well just make sure you're on the right side of Cam, because I get the feeling he's keeping receipts, Cam. And he's not smiling right now. We'll get to Cam later on today.
I was waiting for the butt.
No, there's no buts, Cam. You're awesome. You're way more true dyed-in-the-wool sports guy than, pro wrestler, any of that attitude. Speaking of the excitement and the celebration of sports like pro wrestling, gosh, I have one more episode in Mr. McMahon. I'm not going to get into it. Zach still needs to finish it. When Zach does, we'll get together and we'll wrap it up. Zach's having a kid. I know he's busy, but we will. He didn't have the kid yet, by the way.
No, not yet. Probably about another month.
All right, well, make sure you get episode 6.
I'm going to get them in. It was
3.
a busy weekend. I got 3 in. I'll get 4, 5, and then 6 in too.
Okay. All right, good. All right. Yeah, we look forward to talking to Zach about that. I've had my mind blown by the whole thing, and it was appropriate for me that I watched it prior to doing play-by-play for Kai Sinat's Little Basketball Association tournament in Atlanta at OTE Arena. I talked a little bit about it yesterday. It was truly a privilege to be a part of that. It was a first-rate operation, and the production value and quality was amazing. The chat on social media was, I think that they adjusted to me. I think it's possible that I grew on them because, I mean, if you look at any of those chats, it's like they're flying F sharp, and it's never you just don't want them to mention you if you're doing what I do. But it was a blast, and the guy Kai Sinat was the man. He was like really cool to talk to afterwards last night. He was super appreciative. And he's a true talent. I will tell you, he's like a content creator, and I have no clue how this thing goes, but I'll tell you this. I was around a bunch of those guys over the course of 72 hours, and whatever it is, that dude has it. And so like, he's very funny. It's not like he's just putting like shocking videos online. He's very, very funny. So I predict, how about this? I got my first take of today. He will transition into some sort of funny man career, right? Like, I don't know how long you can be a content creator, streamer, but I truly believe like he wants to act, and I think he will. He does a lot of stuff with guys like Kevin Hart. He's Shannon Sharp, those dudes. Like, he can be like a funny guy to Shannon Sharp, as straight laced as he can be. Anyways, the guy Kai Cenat, he's got a present. It's not like he has a future, but I think he'll be around and in our lives for a long time. A lot of fun playing basketball. I will tell you, before the game yesterday, okay, there was a trade made in the Little Basketball Association. I'm not going to get too in the weeds about this. I'm just going to tell you a story. So they're like, hey, Kai Cenat's team, the New York Sky, in this Little Basketball Association, which was the celebrity content creator streamer, over 16 million combined YouTube, 11 million Instagram. He created this basketball league where he could play at 22 years of age against 8 and 9-year-olds. And the reason that it was funny was because he was actually trying 150% of the time. He was going hard the whole time. And it was very funny. And it was also competitive and compelling. But before the game yesterday, we learned that his team had acquired a young man by the name of Lil RT. I didn't know who Lil RT was. It turns out that he is a young hip hop artist who has smashed the internet, right, with a couple provocative songs, to say the least, and provocative video with him and some provocative women as part of his music videos. Lil RT is he wants to give off the persona that he's a dangerous young man. So the trade is made. Lil RT, we're told, is going to be on Kai's team. So we're in this green room before the game, and we're told that Lil RT is in the building. I'm not exaggerating here. This is really how it went down. So all of a sudden, this young guy, 9, 10 years of age, enters this green room area that we're in, and he's got a ski mask on. And he's got like 9 or 10 people with him. I have never seen anything like this in my entire life. Here he is, Lil RT, with the ski mask on. So at that point, my question is he any good at basketball, and will he keep the ski mask on? Well, Zach Burke is here to cue it up for you. You'd think we'd be talking about Pete Rose today, right? We will. But this is I want to get this while it's top of mind. Zach Burke has a piece of video that answers both of those questions. Can he play basketball, and did he keep the ski mask on? Go ahead, Zach.
That's the table, pulls the trigger, off the glass, no good. Another rebound for Cenat here as we get things started. Look at Johnny Howard King, such great vision over the course of his LBA career. Why would he not have it tonight?
My man Weston Mopa is ready for the challenge. One-on-one down low, he is going to give Kai issues.
Kai giving up the basketball to Howard. Here's Cal Jackson. There's Lil RT. Lil RT getting his money's worth on that first foul. Knocking Weston Mopa to the ground.
Freeze.
2 Chainz.
This happened right in front of 2 Chainz. And I will tell you, shortly after that moment, the game became a blowout, and we didn't see much more of Lil RT. He actually had one sequence at the end of the game where he had the basketball, but he did not dribble with it, right? He just moved with it, which is traveling. So Lil RT did not seem like he was polished as a basketball player, but he had these black Air Force Ones on. He had the ski mask, and clearly he went into attack mode on that young Mopa kid, knocking him to the ground. If you're listening through the audio podcast medium, Lil RT with the ski mask basically just ran this kid over, knocked him to the ground. He gave off Mike Tyson vibes. Like, after that moment, wherever Lil RT was, it felt like Mike Tyson approaching the ring in like 1986. It was scary. And the energy in the arena, which was packed, was palpable. But that's the sort of energy that this little basketball association and Kai Cenat brought to it. There is 2 more games left, or 1 more game on Wednesday night. Literally, they bumped us for the big leaguers. I think you heard King McClure there. It's going to be Sean Grandy, who does the Celtics radio, and Richard Jefferson, obviously of ESPN and NBA fame, will be calling the championship. I will say that I made handwritten boards for these games, for every game, and I left the boards at the front desk of the hotel for Sean Grandy. I'm sure he won't use them, but if he does, they're there for him when he shows up. All right, we started off with the light stuff today. We're going to move through to Pete Rose. Pete Rose's legacy, the term is overused maybe now, but it was the same kind of term we talked about and used when another Ohio guy died not so long ago. Bob Knight. Complicated is a word that comes up a lot. Pete Rose obviously came into my life. Really, it was one of my first sports memories was Pete Rose and the Phillies playing in the 83 World Series, losing to Baltimore. Pete actually, at that point in his career, was being phased out by the Phillies. He wasn't an everyday starter at that point. He won a World Series with the Phillies in 1980, where he was really, people could say, the element or the ingredient that pushed them over into the World Series or push them to a World Series championship in 1980 when they beat the Royals. He just kind of brought that, hey, I'm a winner, right? He had won so much in Cincinnati with the Big Red Machine. And really an amazing story from Jump Street, right? I mean, he was from, and I can tell you this because I didn't read it. God damn it. I still can't tell the truth about that. Keith O'Brien wrote the book, Charlie Hustle, about Pete Rose. We actually talked to Keith on this show in March about Pete Rose and Pete Rose's legacy. Keith is the man. You got to check out the book too. It's called Charlie Hustle. You can get the audio version like me or get the hardback. The coolest part about it is it's brand new. It's really the most recent outside of the HBO documentary documentation of Pete's life like that, at least in the mainstream. So Pete was, he earned everything he had. He was not the most talented baseball player. He only got a shot in the major leagues because he had a relative, an uncle, who was a scout in the Reds organization and gave Pete an opportunity. Basically a guy who got a tryout, played in the minor leagues, and played his ass off to the point where it was undeniable and unmistakable that this guy had the grit and the enthusiasm that not only produced but carried over to his teammates. The nickname Charlie Hustle, there's a couple different stories about it. The way that Pete would tell the story was that it was like a nickname that was really earned and was bestowed upon him in a complimentary fashion. The several versions that I heard and was in the book by Keith O'Brien was that Whitey Ford and Mickey Mantle were actually making fun of him because he was playing so hard in a spring training game that meant nothing. And those guys were like, look at Charlie Hustle out there. Like, is this guy freaking for real? And that's where he got the name Charlie Hustle. He went on to have an amazing career in his hometown with the Reds. The more I learned about Pete Rose through reading this book and through the HBO documentary is that he was absolutely obsessed with baseball, like in the best way possible, but ultimately in the worst way possible. Al Michaels did the Reds radio and television in the early stages of his career. And Al talks about the fact that Al loved to bet horses, and he would go to the horse track with Pete. They would go to the dog track in spring training down in Tampa. And it was clear that Pete really liked to gamble. We all know the story. The hit king in Major League Baseball. How does somebody like that not get into the Hall of Fame? Well, they don't get into the Hall of Fame by gambling on baseball. When you are in a locker room, just having the small relationship I had working in the NBA to pro sports, like it is everywhere you go in the annals of an NBA facility or Major League Baseball facility, there is a huge sign that lets you know that if you gamble on sports, especially the sport you're involved in. I don't know it verbatim, but it says that you will be like it's punishable by extermination or whatever. Not extermination; they're not going to kill you, but but you can be banned. Pete was banned for life. I think when Pete made the deal to be banned for life, he did not think it would be forever. Literally, I think a year or 6 months after he was banned by Paul Giamatti, the actor's dad, who was the commissioner at the time, Bart Giamatti died. And Pete he owned up to it, but way too late. And he was betting a lot of money on other sports, football, basketball, and college pro. And the scariest part about Pete Rose, or the most unfortunate part, I think, obviously that he bet on his own team, but he also welched on bets, which I thought was pretty egregious, just as like an honorable guy. Like he lost tens of thousands of dollars. And according to this book and according to other sources, he owed a lot of money to a lot of scary people in Cincinnati and didn't pay him. Like, think about that. Like he just didn't pay. He got down so much and he was like, forget you. I'm Pete Rose. I'm not paying. Like, that's kind of dangerous. And just like, that's rockhead behavior. And the reason I say that is because when you bet, a lot of people, everybody, especially in sports, not everybody, but people have their skeletons. Nobody's perfect. I mean, even me in AA and recovery, I mean, part of like in one of the biggest pieces of our literature, it says like, we are not saints, like progress, not perfection. Like you understand people's flaws or you try to have grace for them. But Pete didn't pay bets that he lost. And that really opened him up for a lot of the negative attention that he would continue to receive. But it also was a window into the egregious type of behavior that will get him into a lot of trouble down the line. To think that you're above the law and you can bet on your own team. And people will say, okay, well, he bet on his own team. Yeah, but let's talk about baseball. And I'm not sitting over here claiming to be Peter Gammons. But if you are going to be the manager of a baseball team and you are going to bet on your team, the Cincinnati Reds, to win on a Tuesday night, but maybe you're not going to bet tomorrow night, or you have a lot of money on this Tuesday night game, you're probably going to throw out a lot of resources towards winning this game. If you have a lot of money on this game and you're in debt to, let's say, a bookie, it's going to affect the way that you handle your pitching staff. It's going to affect the way that you handle approaching everyday players or sitting a catcher who might need a rest. And that is more egregious behavior. And the fact that he committed that ultimate sin was the reason why he never made it into the Hall of Fame. Now, I will tell you, that's the reason why. I'm not even saying he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, but that's the reason why. And I think another thing that sucks is that he will at some point get into the Hall of Fame, but now he's dead. At 83 years of age, Pete Rose passes away. And there was a lot wrong with Pete Rose. On a personal level, I mentioned that he didn't pay gambling debts. That was an allegation. A much more serious allegation is statutory rape. Right? Like, yeah, he had relationships with women who are, I'm not talking like 18. We're talking like 16. And Pete can say that the legal consenting age in the state of Ohio was like 17 at the time or 16 at the time. It's like it's a whole gross deal that is another reason why not to show a guy like Pete Rose grace. Right now, you say, okay, what about Ty Cobb? Well, we're not talking about Ty Cobb. We're talking about Pete Rose right now. Okay. And there were also a lot of very, very dark people who were in Pete Rose, his orbit. And I mean, this one guy who has come clean, there's two dudes that Tommy Giosa is the one guy. Tommy Giosa has turned his life around. He was one of Pete's buddies who Pete took under his wing, and Tommy became Pete's like errand boy and, did a lot of Pete's dirty work. Okay. Like, he's not the first athlete to have a guy that knows where the bodies are buried. Right. but Pete is unique in a way that he totally screws these guys over. Like at some point, if you're close to Pete Rose, it was illustrated in a lot of, again, like in this book and through a lot of different sources, like he'll just freaking ghost you. He did it to Tommy. He did it to another guy, Paul Hansen. And Paul Hansen was another guy, like a guy that was in Pete's world at the Gold's Gym in Cincinnati, Ohio. And there was just so much shady stuff going on. Allegations of cocaine trafficking that were linked to Pete and linked to Pete making money so Pete could pay off some of these debts. Pete never touched a drink or a drug in his life, which is interesting. Behavioral problems had nothing to do with that type of substance. Gambling and character issues. Because I don't know. I mean, look, whatever. Character issues. There's character stuff there. Pete lied a lot too. People close to him would say. And Pete was a charismatic, entertaining guy who was a flawed dude. I think with the issue we have with Pete in today's society is that he owned up to gambling. When he did, it was far too late. Some of the female stuff is unforgivable. And it's also like he never, even like when he went back to the Phillies, when they celebrated the 1980 team, I think it was in maybe 2020, or they did a Phillies greats thing not too long ago. And he acted like a schmuck. Like there was a female reporter that asked him a question and he called the girl babe. And then he was really like, I mean, I saw there's actual footage. And then Pete like mills around and the Phillies PR team tries to get Pete to apologize. And the apology is complete horseshit. So I am a total sucker for sports and sports celebrities. I am telling you that there was a lot, or at least some serious stuff not to like about Pete Rose. Sorry, it's true. He was an inspiration on the field. Like when I could go on about this dude forever. There's so much interesting stuff, like in that World Series where, he knocked out Ray Fosse, the catcher, from the All-Star game from the Cleveland Indians. He actually had dinner with Fosse the night before and one of Fosse's teammates. And people said that after that game, Fosse's career was never the same. Like, yes and no. The guy went on to play for 10 more years. He just was never an all-star again. Did Pete Rose crashing into him at home plate? You'd like to think if it was that serious, he wouldn't have played hardly at all anymore. But so that's where I think he kind of got a bad rap with some of the stuff on the field. Like, why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. The guy didn't have an off switch on the field. Apparently he didn't have an off switch off of it either. This first segment has gone way too long, but the conversation about Pete Rose, I think, will probably continue throughout the week. And I want more of it. I'll have more with Cam Stewart coming up here shortly. We're going to go to break, and then we're going to talk to my man Kevon Cobb. Great to have him back in the cut. He talks to us about what's going on in North Carolina around the hurricane over the past week, and also his own little storm brewing around some picks, college and pro football. The Pete Sousa Show, powered by the Rogue Media Network. I stole that from Cam. I told you he was a pro. Rolls on after this.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
all, I'm a little disappointed that you didn't join us last week. What the hell's going on over there?
Well, first we got a shift that we had at work yesterday or last week that we couldn't show up or miss and show up to this instead. Sadly, I wish I was here. But there also is a lot going on in North Carolina in terms of weather. So that definitely.
Hey, yeah, how you doing?
Well, here in Charlotte, we're doing pretty good. We just got a little bit of rain, but I'm actually from Asheville, North Carolina. My parents are in Black Mountain, and they got wrecked pretty bad. I think they're going to come out here to Charlotte as soon as they possibly can. We live on a dirt road that is like completely vertical, and the mudslides from that hurricane just completely destroyed our road. So like they couldn't go anywhere all weekend. They were stuck there. There was a lot to it, but they're doing all right. Seems like
they're
a lot
okay.
of people in Nashville are okay as well.
Wow, scary deal, right? I mean, you're kind of at the mercy of the storm at that point.
Right? Yeah, you don't expect it to, Asheville is pretty high up in the mountains and it's fairly inland. I didn't expect for it to hit Asheville much harder than it hit Charlotte, but I guess once it got up into those mountains, it hung out for a while.
Did you lose touch with them?
Absolutely, yeah. People there are completely out of service, out of power, Wi-Fi. Everything is kind of knocked out. So every couple of days, they were able to reach out from a neighbors who had a generator and all these different things that were set up for them to be able to get people online.
So are they headed to see you?
They are. They're coming down to Charlotte today.
Well, that's good. You can return the favor because clearly they did a good job raising you. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, look, that's why sports is great. We can get it, brings us together, a little distraction in times like these. And I know obviously you had a probably busy couple of days and the weekend, but give me your number one thought coming out of last week's NFL. Number one.
Well, I got to admit, Jaden Daniels has been absolutely dealing in Washington. He went to Arizona against my favorite starting quarterback and outperformed him. And, at this point, I have to jump on that train. I initially thought, maybe Jaden Daniels was not going to work out in the NFL, but he has proven me, and I'm sure a lot of other people wrong. He has been absolutely balling.
Okay, so I want to touch on the Jaden Daniels stuff with you. Do you think, are we getting ahead of ourselves with the Jaden Daniels excitement? You tell me, you're the football player, but I feel like everybody is like, everybody's all in on this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're too ahead of ourselves. The offense hasn't punted. They've punted the football one time in the last 3 weeks. I mean, they're putting up points and points and points on team after team. It's hard to say that, 4 weeks in, that's about a quarter of the season gone by, and he's been balling. It's hard to say we're too early. I could see there being some form of a slump at some point, but it didn't happen for CJ Stroud last year. Why would it happen to Jaden Daniels this year?
Okay, so clue me in on this. What's the difference now that these younger quarterbacks are able to be effective right away? Is it because of the West Coast offense or kind of the pass-happy system is high school, college, and the pros? Is it something – does that have something to do with it, or is there something else at play?
Yeah, I'd say so. I would say Cliff Kingsbury, offensive coordinator in Washington, has really catered towards Jaden Daniels' strengths, and that is, moving the football quick, running outside the pocket, and letting him launch the ball down deep. I think a lot of it has to do with the situation. I think, for Bryce Young last year, he kind of went from Alabama where he was run and gun, pass, and now it's 3-step drop. You can tell that his footwork was never really defined for something like that. And that's why I think Bryce Young struggled so much, going into this year. I think, he was just a little shell shocked with everything. But you think about CJ Stroud, he's doing a lot of the same stuff in Houston that he was able to do at Ohio State. I think Ohio State prepared him for the NFL. But I think you think about situation and the way the offensive coordinator handles their quarterback, that's really what helps a young quarterback thrive early.
You mentioned it. We are a quarter of the way through the NFL season. What has been the biggest surprise for you? We already talked about Jaden Daniels. What's other than that? Because I think a lot of people have been surprised by that. What has shocked you the most?
I think the easy choice is the Minnesota Vikings, especially Sam Darnold. I mean, Sam Darnold is looking pretty early in this season to be, a top 5 quarterback. dare I say that he's been a top 5 quarterback in the league for the last 4 games. I'm not saying, he's one of the best, but he has statistically been up there with the best quarterbacks in the league. And the fact that the Minnesota Vikings are now 4-0, I wouldn't have never predicted that. I have a fantasy football team. I had the 3rd overall pick. Justin Jefferson was on the board. I said, no, thank you. I'm not touching Sam Darnold at quarterback. But the fact that they're 4-0, Sam Darnold is dealing the football all around the field, that was pretty surprising, and it's cool to see. Good for the NFL.
All right, let's take a look into the crystal ball now. We got a great slate of football. It is October 1st. I really love this time of year. We're turning the corner. I know you're in Charlotte. You have that crappy weather, but, the leaves are changing colors and coming down. It's a beautiful time of year around the country, especially in the Beltway and towards the southern part where you are. What do you like this weekend as far as NFL and college games? Do you have NFL and college for us, or just the NFL?
Oh yeah, we've got both this weekend. Yeah, September is the exciting time. Football's back, but October is where teams are officially made. This is where, deals are done. Like, this is where your team finds its identity. Are we going to be a team that can compete, or are we a team that cannot compete? And I think Michigan is in a big spot this weekend to really define themselves as a team. Okay, are we going to make the playoff? They're playing against Washington, a rematch of the national championship last year. And Michigan took a big loss versus Texas, but they made a big-time quarterback change with Alex Orji now running the show. And they won a big game against USC. They win again last week. And I think this is a first test, for Washington being in the Big Ten. And I think Alex Orji does just enough offensively for that defense to welcome Washington to the Big Ten football.
I like that pick a lot. I like how you touched on the quarterback change there in Michigan, sort of settling down right after that Texas loss. That's a great point. They've shown a lot of resolve since then. Okay, what else do you have?
Another one that we've got is a team who is trying their best to, eke their way into the playoff, by winning their conference. And that's James Madison. James Madison is going to Louisiana Monroe, and they have been absolutely laying it on teams recently. They put 63 points up last week versus Ball State, rolling to a 63-7 win, and they put up 70 points. 70. That's back 63 and 70 in back-to-back weeks on offense. I think that this James Madison team is a team that can play ball. And until somebody can stop that offense, I'm betting on James Madison, and they're going to stay in my betting slip. They're favored by, I believe, 17 points. And I'm going to take those points until I see something otherwise I can stop this offense.
And they're at ULM in Monroe, Louisiana.
They are in Louisiana.
Hopefully they can get over the smell from the paper mill in West Monroe when they get off the plane, and they'll be all right. All right, what do you have next on deck?
We're moving on to Sunday, and this Sunday is an interesting one. There's a lot of teams that are, like I said, trying to find identity, trying to win some football games. But we talked about Jaden Daniels, and Cleveland is rolling into Washington, and at home, I have to go with the Washington Commanders -3 points. Jaden Daniels, like I said, has proven me completely wrong week after week, outperforming a lot of, not just rookie quarterbacks, a lot of quarterbacks in the league. This offense is rolling, punted one time in the last 3 weeks. I'll jump on this train this week versus struggling Cleveland Browns team who offensively just cannot get it together. I don't think it's completely on Deshaun Watson. There is a big piece of it that is on him. I mean, especially considering how much, the Cleveland Browns gave up to get Deshaun Watson. But the offensive line is struggling really bad as well. And I think that the Washington Commanders are going to be able to put enough pressure on Deshaun Watson, put enough points up on offense. I could see them struggling a little bit because Cleveland's defense is elite. Myles Garrett will probably get some pressure on Jaden Daniels, but I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to do just enough for them to win that game this week.
All right, what do we got? Wrap me up with something else. You got one more?
Oh, yeah, we got another one, and I'm just going to point to that sign right there.
Oh, here we go. I was going to ask you either way to check in on
Here we go. We got Carolina on the road in Chicago, and Chicago is favored by 4 points. But I think the Red Rocket, Andy Dalton, And Dave Canales has our offense rolling. Deontay Johnson is looking like the number one receiver that we have been begging for here in Charlotte. And, we lost Shaq Thompson in the middle of the defense for the second season in a row. That really hurts. I hope that he's going to be all right. But this defense, I think we're going to be able to figure something out. We couldn't stop a nosebleed last week, but I think that we can do just enough. We can clean up just enough. We have enough time to prepare to eke out definitely a cover. I'm praying for a win. And, the key for that game is going to be turning Caleb Williams over. They're still struggling offensively. Caleb Williams is still figuring it out. Let's get JC Horn on DJ Moore, a little rematch game. And I think that we're going to get that win this week.
How much has the temperature around pro football changed since Bryce Young, they put him on ice, and now we've got Andy Dalton? It just seems like from 30,000 feet or from far away here in Texas, there's a much more competitive brand of football being played.
Yeah, 100%. And, part of me wishes it was Bryce Young. To be completely honest, I was able to do it, but I'm a Carolina Panthers fan. I love the fact that now last week we have people in the stands. Apparently it was a great atmosphere in Charlotte last week. I couldn't make it to the game, but we lose that game, but we lose and nobody's really like feeling, oh, poor me, this team is terrible. Why am I a Panther? I'm not embarrassed to call myself a Panthers fan today. I think that we're starting to play some real football, and I think Andy Dalton has a lot to do with that.
All right, keep on Cobb, man. Keep up the good work. And I hope your parents and they get to Charlotte safe, and that they're doing okay. And I'm looking forward to you joining me next week.
I'm excited for next week. And what I'll say about a situation like that in Asheville is God always will find a way to show what is real about life. We all love sports. Football is a huge thing, but the big thing is safety, family, and keeping people close. And I think sports, honestly, is a great way for that. So I appreciate you having me on to talk about and celebrate sports in a time where, North Carolina could be bleak. But, hey, this is always a great time for me, Pete. Thank you so much, man.
All right, Kevon. Thank you, man. We'll talk to you next week.
Cheers.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
By the way, it's the Pete Sousa Show where I am wearing the old school Phillies hat because this is the exact color, the kind that Pete Rose wore, the burgundy. And I'm wearing it with a lot of respect. In segment one, we talked about Pete Rose, and I talked about some of his flaws. And I do. Hey, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, I guess is what I'm saying. Cam Stewart, we bring you in. I'll let you speak ill of the dead now.
It's gladly.
I do. I know you were talking. Hold on. I know you were talking to Grace last night.
Yeah, I
your
did mention a little
significant
bit of
other.
this, yeah.
And Grace was saying, I appreciate that you guys were talking about this because I was talking to Christy about it as well.
Mhm.
Explaining the Pete Rose dynamic, the cheating, why it wasn't okay,
Yeah.
Why he should maybe be in the Hall of Fame even still. Take me into your conversation with Grace last night and your
Yeah.
thoughts on Pete Rose. That's a
So-
very broad question.
It's yeah. And it's when I tell it to Grace, she has the same opinion that most people our age and below have. And some a little older than us. It's like, and we were talking about this with Zach earlier. It's like you
Zach
see
Burke.
you see like FanDuel, Underdog, whatever some of the other big sports books are, like they're in partnership with MLB. You see it everywhere now. It's so like, I mean, we have shows on this channel, on ESPN, on whatever sports thing, and you've got gambling shows and betting the spreads. And like people make their lives off of this now in the media. Like Jimmy the Greek isn't the only guy anymore. And so it's weird that in 2024, something that is so casual now, and it's like, wow, it's one of the greatest baseball players ever. He's being held out of the Hall of Fame for gambling. And so I think that's the way she initially took it. But I'm kind of more in your boat from listening to your first segment of.
Did you like the first segment?
I did, Pete. Is that what you wanted? Yeah, it was a great segment. But it's like, yes, betting is so open now. But like we had a Shohei Ohtani incident this year. Like when you're playing, you're still not supposed to be doing that or managing or officiating, obviously. Like you're not supposed to be doing
by
that.
the way, you weren't here on Friday when Nick picked, who I just think you guys be a match made in heaven, weighed in, my buddy from New York.
Yeah.
Hardcore Yankees. Just knows,
Sounds like a great mix.
knows so much baseball. It's a joke. And he was like, he just brought up the Ohtani thing. Like, where did that go exactly? Like, it was not that long ago.
Under the rug, 50-50. Like, we're just done with that.
Right, done.
And I see it all the time. Like kids who are playing college sports, like they're not allowed to do like bracket challenges or fantasy football, or people working with athletic departments can't do that. So it's like we still have boundaries, as open as this is for the fan. And like Pete Rose was the manager of the team.
Yeah.
That's really tough for me to overcome. And maybe that makes me sound old school, but like he managed the team. And Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I basically said about this earlier is exactly what Pete said in the first segment without hearing my show.
That's true.
Of like, even if all the things he said are true, which take that with 10 grains of salt if you look at the rest of his life and how long he lied about it. Okay, so he bet on the Reds to win. Whoa, well, shouldn't that be good? He's trying to win ball games. But I laid out basically exactly what you did.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Is he going to put a pitcher on 3 or 4 days rest because he wants to win this game?
Yes.
Like that, then that screws up his career potentially, his career earnings if he gets an injury. That's a big deal. And by the way, that could mess up the rest of their season. I don't want to pay a manager anything that if he's gambling on his team's games, win or lose. Like that's not okay. He has more control over the game than almost anyone. He's the manager of the team. I don't know if Marge Schott would have cared because she was awful. But
So by the way,
yeah,
when he was with the Reds and he signed in '85, he signed a contract to pay him $1 million a year as the manager. Now think about that. He was betting tens of thousands of dollars. If you want to do the whole breakdown of how much does $1 million go, I mean, you're giving $500,000 to the government. You know, that whole deal we've heard forever. Like, that's just not that much money when you're living in the Pete Rose universe.
Right.
And that's why guys were way more susceptible to, being on the take or betting against a team or throwing a game. Now, I don't think that nobody has ever said he ever threw a game or that just was not in this guy's DNA. But he clearly could have been in panic mode, betting on his own team, trying to drum up funds.
There's a lot that we don't know either. Like it was all, it was illegal. So it was all underground.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't know that he didn't bet on his team to lose. And that's what kind of bugs me, is like, we really, at the end of the day, do not know that.
Yeah.
And to that other point we just had, we don't know the lengths that he went, the extent that he went to for how he managed his baseball team based on his bets. And that's I get that. That's scary towards the integrity of the game. And it's for people my age and probably your age too, of like, we've seen mostly Pete Rose, not as a baseball player, as a manager, but as a guy trying to rehab his image for 20 years now, since he finally admitted to betting on baseball. And so to us, like, oh, it's sad, sad old man. He's just trying so hard to be likable for so long to try and get into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And it's Charlie Hustle and this, that, and the other. And what we don't kind of get as much of in the story is the decade plus of lying and saying that he didn't bet on baseball, and the statutory rape that you talked about earlier, like these kind of, or just the way he treated other people that we see in the books and the documentaries. And it does become damning to see how many people don't come to your defense. And I know there's some people out there that would, but Michael Jack Schmidt, one of the greatest of all time, he puts it in his Hall of Fame speech.
Yeah.
That's a massive deal.
Yeah.
And yet Johnny Bench, his longtime teammate, will never stick up for him.
No.
Ever. Never say, he's always said he broke the rules. Never, I was with Pete for a decade and a half. There's no one that cared more about baseball than him. Johnny
Bench
never said that, and probably will never say
told Kirk Gowdy in like 1975 or something, when Gowdy was covering the World Series. Pete needs to stop hanging out with some of these shady characters. Pete was like, he had shadowy figures hanging around himself and the Reds facility when he was a player, and when he was a manager. Yeah. I mean, school was out. There were people coming and going that, finally, I think, if my memory serves me, that I read in that book, Charlie Hustle, that like the organization was finally like, we got to start like being a little tougher on like who's traveling in and out of our facility. And
it was tough in that they get into this in the documentary that I started watching last night.
Yeah, dude, like, you're so much like me. I'll probably watch it again now.
Yeah. I'll probably finish it in the next couple of days. But like, he was one of those rare, not just a legends, but like a god. He's from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
It's a baseball town. He becomes one of the greatest baseball players ever. He plays in a way that everyone wants to, and everyone wants to see in their players. He's one of those, like a LeBron James in Cleveland, or, name your guy, that it's very, 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 very difficult to say no to.
Yes.
In that town.
Yeah.
And he could live a whole life like that. And that's what he did.
And
by the way, can I get off for 1 second here? Can I get off, please? Off this topic a little bit, because it's something you brought up earlier. The great misconception of Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb is not the guy you learned about.
Tell me.
Ty Cobb is known as this awful person, just vitriolic racist, like the worst person imaginable. And I am so thankful that we're not there yet, but that myth is being debunked big time, especially the racist stuff, because he was like a huge proponent and supporter of the Negro Leagues for years, and a proponent to integrate baseball in the like 30s and 40s and 50s. That was like insane. And there's really only a select few teammates who you hear from that are like, yeah, Ty Cobb wasn't a good guy. And from what we're hearing now, there's just as many that were like,
what are we hearing now that's new? Who is?
There was a good book written about 10 years ago about Ty Cobb and the myth, and I wish I had it in front of me.
So this is your source for this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really well researched, and we get this Ty Cobb movie with Tommy Lee Jones that he's like this just insane person. But when you look at it, he's actually really just like Pete Rose on the field, right? Like, he would spike guys. He was very intense. He probably took some liberties with playing the game the same way Pete Rose did, all in the sake of playing hard.
That. Like that stuff doesn't bother.
It doesn't to me either, because
I should probably be more,
because we're sports sickos, right? So we don't mind. It's like the basketball coach who tells you, I don't mind if you're fouling as long as you're playing hard.
Yeah.
It's the wimpy shit that we don't like. So Ty Cobb was a lot like that, but off the field, more of a loner, Southern guy, tough upbringing, which I know is a big Pete Sousa thing. You love an athlete with a tough upbringing. Very tough. His mom killed his dad. So, you know, it was a big deal. But not the story. Like the story of him stabbing a doorman is not true. And him being racist, just not true. And so Pete Rose is like Ty Cobb in a lot of ways. But I would argue if we got down to brass tacks and what was more real, Pete Rose has more skeletons in the closet, and yet we think like Ty Cobb's the worst guy to ever play baseball.
Did
So
you
I just
talk
find that
about? Did you talk about this on the Cam show?
We didn't talk about Ty Cobb.
Oh,
We
well,
didn't talk
that's
about Ty Cobb.
that is look.
But like all that to say from the
That's
beginning
news
of
to me,
this,
pal. That's all I can say.
dude.
I mean,
We got to get you the book because, and I'm not blaming you. This is sound patronizing. I'm not blaming you
No,
because
no.
that's what we heard for years and years and
Yeah.
decades. And I actually feel bad for Ty Cobb that his real reputation was never known in his lifetime. And, you know, so much was controlled by the sports writers back then, and it kind of screwed him. It kind of screwed
why?
Ted
Where
Williams
did
in some ways.
he get off on the wrong foot with
Yeah, and he
sports
did,
writers?
yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And he didn't like the writers.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with Ted Williams, who definitely did some not great things in his life, but like the writers hated Ted Williams. They gave Joe DiMaggio an MVP the year that Teddy Ballgame hit 400 for an
Yeah.
entire season. Like and you look back, like there should have been like 5 years
Well,
that
this-
Ted
that-
Williams
that
won the
still goes-
MVP
Look,
and happened like twice.
I'm going to
you know?
venture into this one, like, and just for 1 second because I want to get back to Pete Rose.
Yes,
but
yeah, sorry about that.
the Colorado not being in the top 25 is ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
is that sports writers like with an extra grind against Dion?
Probably a little bit. I think it's also
Because
extra
there's the
grind against the
culture
Big
and all
12
these
and the
people
whole
who-
culture around it. Yes,
Yeah.
I think there's some of that. They don't want Colorado to be propped up, and it's a weird duality, right? Because the media obviously really does,
Yeah,
but the writers and the
Isn't that
people who
crazy?
like take this too seriously,
yeah.
they don't want that to be there. But Colorado is deserved to be
Yeah, I mean,
top 25
if you look,
because I thought UCF deserved to be top
so
25.
did I.
And
Yeah,
Colorado went into their house and kicked the shit out of them.
like Colorado plays
So,
UNLV today. Colorado's winning, I would say.
Yeah.
That's my
Maybe that's
opinion.
what will get him in the top 25.
That's just my opinion.
Anyway.
All right, so the Pete Rose thing. What is? Yeah, I know your dad's going to join you tomorrow.
I hope so. Yeah. Working it out.
Is somebody like that, like the older guard who had an impact on you, the feeling around Pete Rose?
I think my dad would not lose any sleep if Pete Rose didn't get in the Hall of Fame
Okay.
for pretty much all the reasons we laid out. I'm a carbon copy of my father in a lot of ways. And there are people his age who want Pete in the Hall of Fame, but I think he thinks of it the same way that I think about steroid guys. And I did talk about this on the show. I heard my favorite podcaster talk about this like a year ago, and it
Mike
really
Hamilton?
struck a chord with me, huh?
Mike Hamilton?
No, not
That's
Mike
what we're
Hamilton. Sorry,
What-
second
why?
favorite podcaster. It's actually freaky.
Rusty.
It's freaky how much me and Kirk Minahan think about things the same way. But he basically said, you don't get everything in life. That's the way I think about the steroid guys. I get it could be viewed a little bit differently these days. And then we start, talking about what the Hall of Fame actually means. And I honestly don't really care if those guys get in. But if they don't, it's like you don't get everything in life.
Yeah.
You got the era of Major League Baseball. You got millions of dollars. You got all these records. And then you got caught. So if you're not in the Hall of Fame, you don't get everything in life. And that is kind of the way I see it with Pete Rose, man. Like he made a big error in judgment for a long time. And we might not only know just the surface level of it. But he has not been a great ambassador to baseball from that time.
Well,
not great. And so
and
you don't get everything.
Here's where I'll tell you, like the topical part of it. This is my father now, the great Joe Sousa, who was probably my inspiration to become a broadcaster, because when Peter Jennings came on, you couldn't talk, right? Like you weren't.
He
allowed.
wasn't a huge sports guy, right?
No, but
Okay.
but
News guy.
and primetime sports,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
Like Monday Night Football,
Sounds like
Philly-
me.
the Phillies in prime time,
Mhm.
right? The Phillies now are winning a World Series. So my dad liked Pete Rose. He liked the way he played.
How could you not?
All the columns he read about him. My dad would read the sports section on the SEPTA to and from work. He worked in the city at 30th Street. So he would go back and forth working for Amtrak, and he would read the sports section of the Philadelphia Inquirer. And so he liked Pete Rose, so much so that in 1999, when baseball finally, it wasn't even baseball, it was MasterCard that had Pete back at the World Series or the NLCS. Or
he might have been at the All-Star game that year.
Maybe. But he was
because that was the all-century team.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was the 99 NLCS with the Braves and the Mets. And Jim Gray started asking him all these questions about gambling on baseball and is now the time to admit it. And Pete did a great job playing the victim in that moment. Was like, hey, I'm not here. I'm here for baseball. I'm here to talk about the all-century team or whatever. My father was so pissed. He wrote a letter to NBC and Jim Gray. My dad was hot.
How do you feel about that Jim Gray thing?
I love Jim Gray because of his contributions to sports journalism. But I think that moment was, I think that's a vanity play at that point in time.
Probably.
Like, come on, dude. Like, I do believe, like, it's not like Pete Rose was a guy you couldn't get access to at that time.
Yeah, you just got to pay enough, but yeah.
Well, but if you're, I don't know. I think that was kind of like I think
it's probably something he regrets now, Jim Gray.
Yeah, I listened to his book last.
But, like, there is an argument of like, it's a journalist.
Yeah,
it's a big journalist thing.
So
I can hear that argument.
Yeah.
I can absolutely hear that argument.
Yeah, I actually sent Jim Gray a tweet. I sent him a direct message. So I was enjoying his book so much. And the Pete Rose chapter was unbelievable. And he got into this. And I sent him a tweet that my father totally disagreed with him and wrote him a letter. But, we can all like agree that he did an amazing job of sharing his thoughts about it. It was a cool little exchange. He was really cool. He got back to me. And I don't know if he said he regretted it. Hold on. Let's check it out. Right.
It's a big, like, journalist kind of rocking a hard place there.
Yeah. Hold on. Because I think
there would have been a faction of people who would have said, how do you just puff piece Pete Rose in this moment when you finally got him in a big stage?
I won't read you what he said. I'll read you what I said.
Okay.
July 25th, 2022. Hey, Jim.
What a day.
Hey, Jim, I'm in the middle of listening to your book, and I keep looking to see how much is left. Really great work.
I want to get to the end of it so bad.
My dad was so pissed about the Pete Rose ordeal. We're from Villanova, so he was a Phillies fan. I wish I could share your side of the story with him now since he's passed. Fascinating stories. And he said, thanks so much for your note and for listening to the book. You didn't get into the.
What if he was?
My memory was so
Pete,
much better of a discussion. In my memory, he
like
weighed in on the Pete Rose thing.
At the end, if he was just like, Pete Rose was such an ass. I'm so sorry you share a name with him. Like, just something like that. Just went in. That would be funny.
But Jim Gray's one of those guys. Like, I really don't care if he was like, I don't know. His contributions to sports and like even like his book. Like, wow, what an
that patty cake thing he did with Brady.
What an amazing story, dude. I mean, the guy's life is just
okay. So Pete, I'm going to jack this here because we're going to need to go.
Yeah.
I don't think you answered this in the first segment, and I'm interested in what you think.
Yeah.
Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
Yes. I think he's a flawed guy and whatever, but I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
That's it.
That's all I wanted to know.
Zach, get us out of here. We'll be back tomorrow with a reaction from Bill Stewart. Everybody have a great day.
Hopefully.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports Pete.
We are Rogue Media Sports.